Hello, good morning. Welcome to today's live. It's May 13th, 2020, and we are still going through a pandemic. And with that happening, I have had a few conversations with people who are trying to figure out what they will be doing. Sorry, guys, I'm always checking. What they will be doing with their online focus groups and how to best move forward. And today is actually about online focus groups. And I did a bit of extra research for today's live in an effort to better support some of you who are going through your getting ready for focus groups and deciding which system to use, which software to go with, and all those decisions, I think, kind of feel like heavy decisions when we're making them. And I have given some direction with what I think might be best and what might work. But in all sincerity, I have never conducted focus groups online. And because of that, I did a bit of research in terms of going out to the communities that I have access and asking qualitative researchers to share their experiences and say what has worked for them as they tried doing their focus groups online and what has not worked as well. And to make it more, I would say, organized for my own thought process, I did put together a few slides. And for those of you who are watching live, I see we have a couple of people. And if you want to ask questions, I'm going to check the questions and the comments before I sign off. But right now, I'm actually going to move to the slides that I prepared for us for today. And for some of you that are, I know, are very interested in this topic and you're not watching this live, when you have a chance and you go through the content that I'm sharing today, feel free to post comments, post questions, and we can always plan and schedule those questions for future lives for the next or the upcoming weeks, or we can just have a discussion in the group. So with that being said, let's move to the slides that I got prepared for us for today. I have something that I want to get rid of here. Moving this. So today is about online focus groups. I feel like this is a very formal word and it might sound weird for the purpose of a live to talk about a disclaimer. But I wanted you to know where I'm coming from as I am teaching and sharing this with you today. So I would say that I have vast experience with in-person focus groups. I have conducted, I would say, dozens of them, and many of my focus groups were cross-lingual. And what does that mean? I did my part of my PhD research with refugee and immigrant women from Northeast Africa. And with them, we had different approaches to how the focus groups were conducted. I facilitated some of them. I was a moderator for some of them. For others, I wasn't. I was just sitting in, and someone who spoke the language moderated the focus group, and we translated the data later on. For others, we had real time interpretation, and I had that ability of moderating and probing and participating. So, different approaches to cross lingual focus groups. I have also had a variety of sizes from 3 people to 18 people. I can tell you that more than 6 is not my preference, but sometimes it happens. And my experience with focus groups was pretty much guided by the principles of community based participatory research. What I am trying to do here today is to transfer some of the things that in my opinion are basically principles of focus groups and conducting focus groups, and trying to see how we can mimic that or transfer that to an online system or software or medium. And today is about online focus groups that I have not conducted myself yet. So I haven't moderated an online focus group. And of course, in order for me to do this today, I am trying to learn from those who have done it so I can give you a bit of insight and ideas and food for thought so you can move forward with more confidence or feeling more prepared for what might happen. And we are not really going with any particular medium here. So you might be using Skype, Zoom, Google Meets, Hangouts, etc. This is more about online versus in person and what to expect. My assumption behind anything that I'm saying today is that you have gone through your ethics approval or your IRB, your institutional review board approval, and whatever you chose and whatever you're proposing for online focus groups has been approved by your ethics board. So the first thing that I wanted to touch on today is focus groups are actually one of many forms of group interviews. There are a variety of ways of conducting group interviews. We can talk about dyads, where you would have maybe a couple, and when I say a couple, um, in that relationship together, and you're asking them the same questions and letting them answer the questions and take turns and build on each other's ideas. You could be talking about a dyad where you have a parent and a child, where you have employer employee, and various scenarios. We could also think about group interviews not being focus groups, and then we have focus groups. And when we think, and I want you to keep this in mind, this is probably the most important sentence of everything I'm going to say today. Interaction among participants is the focal point of data generation and analysis in focus groups. This is something that I think a lot of people, and this is what you will also read when you start delving into the focus group literature, is how a lot of focus groups and the experts in this method will say that people claim to be conducting focus groups, but they are actually not conducting focus groups. It's more of a group interview. And why am I saying that? If you think about a scenario where you ask a question and then you let everyone around the table to answer, like ask everyone around the table to answer that question, that is not a focus group. That is more a group interview. A focus group is really built on the interaction between participants. You get to a point where you as a moderator, you throw the first question out there, and then the group starts a discussion about that question, and they build on each other's ideas and they contrast. They might agree, they might not agree, and that's how you get that richness of a focus group. When it doesn't happen like that, when you have a situation where the moderator is asking a question and everyone is taking turn to answer that, everyone is taking turn to answer that question, and then a second question is asked and then everyone answers that question, that is more a group interview. And the reason why it happens so often, I think there are a few reasons why that happens often. It might be the topic, it might be the dynamic that you have in the group where people haven't built enough rapport and relationship to feel comfortable bouncing ideas from each other. And age might also be another factor. If you are talking to an age group that they might be more shy, insecure about expressing their thoughts, ideas in a group, you might not get that level of interaction that a focus group is really striving to get. I have had many, I said dozens of focus groups, and I can tell you that when I look back, I can think of at least a handful of them where, knowing what I know now and contrasting the different focus groups that I have conducted, I look back and I see they were group interviews. They were not really focus groups. And some were really because I had one that always comes to my mind when I think about that. And it was a focus group with pregnant and postpartum women in a small rural community in Alberta. And most of the moms were teenagers. And on that day, one of the moms had someone from social services who was with her. And that presence really made the interaction really challenging. I think it was already a group where there was a lot of dynamics with the circumstances that the moms experienced, and that external presence made it almost impossible for interactions to go naturally. And it was one that I consider one of the most challenging focus groups I have ever conducted. And I ended up probing a lot, asking questions a lot, intervening just to restart the conversation. And that would not be the ideal focus group in terms of the interaction. So when you have a focus group, you really have interaction as the center during data collection and data analysis. That's why when people say focus groups are easier to conduct, like time effective, all of those things, I always think you don't know what you're talking about, because focus groups are rich and wonderful, but they are not easy to conduct. I'm not saying that to discourage anyone who is trying to do focus groups, but I want you to know that there are really some important aspects of focus groups as a method of data collection that in some ways are outside of our control as researchers. And we need to really um, be in the right mindset to reflect about how things are going and make changes and adaptations as needed. We'll talk about that later on. So, now moving to the online focus groups. When we are thinking about online focus groups, and this is what I gathered for you today, also from people, from two academics that have conducted online focus groups, and what they shared with me was, in preparation, strive for a size of 4 to 5 people, not more than that. They really discourage larger groups because it is hard to know how it's going to go with a focus group anyway, and online adds another layer of complexity. So it is important for you to consider, if you can, not have a group that is larger than 5. You also need to take some time thinking on your icebreaker. How are you going to make people more comfortable with one another in an online setting? And the two people that I talked to said they always go around and have people introduce themselves. And one thing that I would add, they didn't have any particular comments about COVID-19, but I am going to add that you might have people who will introduce themselves and also say what they are doing during the pandemic. And that might be incredibly relevant to you depending on what type of research you're doing. I know one of the people that are going through this is doing research with health professionals and people who are actually inside an intensive care unit. And you can imagine how COVID-19 might have exacerbated things that were not working well in their work environment, or that might have revealed things that were working well and they could capitalize on because a pandemic made them realize what what is really a way to move forward and what is not a way to move forward. So be ready for those conversations to happen in the introduction and know or have a plan. You can't really know, but have a plan on how you're going to go about them. Whether you're going to use that as data or whether you're going to really allow that to be a moment where people will be talking and chatting and connecting to each other. So, really, it's like a true icebreaker there. I put the donuts there. That was a choice of a picture that was really on purpose. On When I'm conducting focus groups, one of the ways that I make sure that I do that ice breaking activity is providing snacks. It's funny, I am a dietitian by trade, but really donuts are the thing. Donuts and coffee will usually be offered before a focus group, and a fruit tray as well. We'll add that. Unfortunately, with online focus groups, you don't get to offer that. You don't have food as something that people will be serving a plate before they get started and chit chatting and commenting on their days. And I find that food is so powerful as an icebreaker when I am conducting focus groups in person. And it's not going to be a possibility when you're doing it online. So I'm almost challenging you to think about what would be your replacement? What would be your donut replacement for your focus group? So if you're not offering food, if you're not having that social time before a focus group, what can really or what question you can open your focus group with and ask your participants to make them comfortable with one another and more inclined to share their perspectives. Another thing that keep it in mind is setting the tone. For online focus groups, you really need to be very clear with your ground rules. It's almost like any Facebook group that you see the rules, like respect one another, like be respectful with the language, all of that. But in addition to that, you really have to discuss confidentiality and anonymity. Focus groups, you can't guarantee anonymity because you have a group of people there, but you need to emphasize how be respectful, don't discuss the discussions that happen in that group outside of that time that you were together, and don't record it, and be really mindful of the other people who are in that setting, in that call, in that virtual setting, in that phone call. um, the consent to record is probably something that you will have already laid out when you submitted your ethics approval. So just make sure that you reiterate that you'll be recording the focus group, and don't forget to press the record button because you will need that. If you're using that video recording, you definitely need to have the record button pressed. Another thing for the ground rules that I wanted to discuss is really more of that making it clear to your participants if they can jump in and talk. So that was one of the things that I got from one of the professors that shared her strategies with me. Make sure that you explain whether or not you want people to raise their hands. Make sure that you tell them that they don't need your permission to speak. They can speak up after someone else is done. That you're there to encourage discussion and participation, but they don't need sort of your approval before they speak up. Um, I would definitely discourage the use of the raise your hand button because I think that makes it very formal. However, if you find that you have either a topic that is controversial within a system or an organization or a unit, whatever that unit is, maybe the raise your button raise your hand button is a good idea, because you won't really have you don't want like a case where people are interrupting one another. And I think that's even more challenging in a virtual, like an online focus group. This last two items that I have listed here are actually coming from my experience. Even though I have not conducted online focus groups, it's really, really good when you have a chance to do a practice run. That will make you more comfortable with your guiding questions. Even when you do a practice run with people you like, that you're very comfortable with, usually for the first few minutes, people are awkward and they don't really know what to say because they're there to help you practice. So it does also help you to really get comfortable with that discomfort. And it's true. And it's something that you need in focus groups. You need to get comfortable in the discomfort of silence, of awkwardness, of not knowing exactly what people will say and how you're going to respond to that. So if you can, do a practice run. And I think in the current environment, it's probably easier to ask people to support you with that, because you can do a short one. It doesn't need to be very long. You can really try to invite people from your group of students or lab and really have that time for you to practice and get more comfortable with the system or the medium you're using, and also with the environment, the online environment. The other piece that I find it's huge, and I think it's huge in person and it's also huge online, is have another body to help. Have someone else, if possible, with you. Not necessarily as a co-moderator. If you have someone who is part of your group of peers, your lab, your um, students, that there is more than one student working on a project or parallel projects, encourage them to work together for that focus group. And see, we are in a different situation with online focus groups, because when you are conducting focus groups in person, you're usually around a table or a circle. And you, as the moderator, you can't really look at everyone in the face. Like, you're paying attention at the person who is speaking in their turn. With an online focus group, everyone will be looking at a camera and you'll be looking at their faces. And you don't want to be distracted by trying to take notes with in terms of their visual expressions. On one hand, you will have that recorded. So that makes it easier for you to go back and watch that recording right after and take notes. However, if you can, have someone else with you during the focus group, because it will make you more grounded and it will alleviate that pressure of paying attention at many things and being ready for the moderation that is your main task. One of the comments I got from a professor, she's in health sciences, was she found that she did have to probe more in online focus groups. And she also had more moments where everyone was silent. This is something that I have written about. If you go back, I have blog posts and social media posts about embracing white space. And it's really hard. And I'm saying it's really hard from experience. I'm not a person that likes to sit in silence. This was 5 seconds. Like, it's really challenging to me. And I want you to know that if that's challenging for you, I totally get you. However, there is beauty in silence. One of the strategies that I have used is counting to 7 in my head. It sounds like a long time, but it isn't. And if you make that effort to not be desperate and to really allow silence to happen, someone will likely pick the topic, pick the baton, and run with it, and will get the ideas flowing and going. So be ready to sit in silence and to allow for that discomfort to happen. I think we can really work on this if we want to also grow as qualitative researchers, either interviewers or moderators for focus groups. So, what happens if you sit in silence, you embrace the white space, you count to seven in your head, and no one says anything? Then I have a couple of ideas to share with you. And what I would do, and this is also based on what you already know about me. I have done focus groups, but I don't have experience with online focus groups. When that introduction happened and everyone went around and told each other who they were, their role, or why they were there participating in the focus group, I would try to write down a couple of things that you feel you can pull on if you need, as you might need to trigger discussion and generate ideas later on. So, if someone, for example, told you they work in a unit, and the example from one of you, so Matt, you're coming to my head. So, if you're talking about a unit and the systems that are uh, working or not working there, and you had a participant who said, well, my role is to schedule the visits or where people will go, which transfers will be happening once they leave ICU. If your topic is related to that, I would definitely use what have I heard from that person as a segue, and in a way you're almost like putting them on the spot, but at the same time you're also showing that you're listening and that you really want to know more about their experience and what they have to say. So that's one of the ideas that I have. The other one is something that I have shared with a few of you and that I truly believe is valuable. This is incredibly important for community based participatory research, the idea of a research champion. And that basically means someone who is also a participant sometimes, or that is facilitating the research process in a way. And that research champion is really keen and enthusiastic about your research. So, because of that, it's likely that you have had more interactions with that person at one point or another. And if that is the case, you probably have heard anecdotes, stories, experiences, things from that person. And this is a moment where I would probably use the relationship that I have fostered with that research champion and pull from that and start the conversation with something that you have already learned from that person. If you are comfortable enough with the research champion in itself, I would even say, well, I've heard from so and so. This is one of the things. Like, can you share with the rest of the group? Like, what can you share with the rest of the group so we can learn and understand more about such topic XYZ, whatever you're investigating. And then there is a big slide. I'm actually starting to really like this slide. The what if. I use this in my master class too. What if you actually don't have enough interaction that right now, knowing what I just told you, that you would feel comfortable saying, oh, I actually conducted a focus group. So, what I would do is if you get to a point where you really are not sure if you conducted a focus group or if it was more a group interview. So you basically asked the question, everyone went around and answered that question. Then you asked another question, or you added a probe and everyone counted on that. That is more a group interview than a focus group. Let's say you finish conducting an online focus group and you feel like that wasn't an online focus group, that was an online group interview. I would say, what pivot can you consider? Are you open to really not being too attached to the word focus group and describing a group interview in your methods? And that's what I have said again and again in the qualitative research during a pandemic is, don't be afraid of going back to the drawing board and revisiting your plans, your methods. Don't be afraid to change. One of the things that we have as a privilege but also as a responsibility is the responsiveness. When you are a qualitative researcher, you can be responsive to your project, to your participants, to your data. And if you're realizing after one or two online focus groups that it's turning out to be more of a group interview, I don't see a problem in revisiting the idea of a focus group versus a group interview and calling it a group interview. I don't think that's irresponsible to the rigor of the study. I think that's responsive. And I would argue that a reviewer who doesn't understand that when you're trying to publish that data is probably not well versed in qualitative research, but you can be the one providing the good references and showing what your decision was based on. And again, I will repeat that. You can own your decisions if they have the backing of good references of experts, and you can go with them without fear. So, this is all I had for today. It was a bit of a different qualitative Wednesday. Definitely spent more time preparing for this one. I wanted to also offer you my go to references when it comes to focus groups. David Morgan is probably one of the focus group gurus. He has some texts from the 90s, I think it's 1998. Still a seminal reading for people who are doing focus groups. It's basically the how to's for focus groups. There is also Dr. Rosalind Barber, who has a very short and sweet book called Doing Focus Groups, and it's a really good book. I have that book. I have used it as a reference and I have read it, and I find it's very easy to understand and very practical. And there is also Dr. Kruger that has some really interesting reads and some, I think a lot of the more recent literature in the area is really challenging that idea of whether or not you're doing focus groups and how much we are spending and paying attention to the interaction, especially when we are doing data analysis and writing the findings from focus groups. So now we come back to me. Hello. So 33 minutes. It was a lot longer than I expected. I don't see any comments right now. If I might be wrong about this, but I saw some people came on and off. I really just want to say, if you have any comments and after you watch this, just ask them there and we can definitely build on what we discussed today in future qualitative Wednesdays. And this is all I had to share with you. I hope it is helpful. And please, if you have experience with online focus groups and you were part of the group, share with us what you can share and what you feel I haven't covered, and it's really important because I think we are all trying to learn and trying to navigate the environment right now with the new realities of qualitative research online. So it's really good when we can learn from each other and be more prepared for when things happen to us and to our research. I think it's the best we can do when we are all learning together. Okay, so take good care, and I will see you next Wednesday. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.